The Yorkshire area is north of London. I went to this very nice Victorian church. My friend is a painter and she lives in the area. So during my painting vacation with her, we went to St. Stephen in Aldwark. It's a Victorian church, very interesting, very nice architecture, and we were fortunate enough, although it was an overcast day, that we had plenty of shaded areas and lighted areas in the building. I decided to paint this view. We set up the easels by the road on a sheltered area, and we started positioning the composition. I thought this was an interesting composition. Needless to say, the sky is super interesting, but I was driven more by the elements of the architecture, and I wanted to capture that on a plein air study, quick study with very broad brush strokes. So the first thing I did is, with the composition, identify the strong vertical element, which evidently it's very clear which one is that, and then make sure that I sketched the large shapes. I exaggerated the angles of the roof in this sketch, but I just wanted to make sure that I positioned all the elements of the building and also position the trees where they had to go. I also identified the strong shadows in the building in the sketch. It's more notable on this particular area of the building, but I wanted to make sure I identified the shadows. To make the painting, I used acrylic, heavy body golden acrylics, colors Indian yellow, alizarin crimson, ultramarine blue, and titanium white. It's much easier to carry on your backpack, fewer colors, and also carry these Senso Linen Canvas Pads. I sometimes use cotton. I've been using linen in 2018. This is toned with a neutral warm color, and I really like it. At the beginning, it was hard for me to get used to the linen, but I highly recommend it. This was 9 by 12, which is very convenient for carrying lighter weight in your back when you're doing plein air. I used only 2 brushes, flats number 4 and 6. So once I had the sketch in front of me, I did a quick block in. Well, not very quick. It probably took a couple of hours. So this is the first stage of the block in. First thing, using a transparent dark with ultramarine blue and alizarin crimson, I just literally just painted what I was seeing. I was trying not to think what they were. I realized after I painted that these were buttresses, but it's better just paint what you see. Don't try to, at least that's what I like, not try to rationalize what kind of structure that is, because my brain plays tricks on me when I'm trying to interpret the architecture. So just put the shadows where I saw them. This dark mix was different levels of ultramarine blue and alizarin crimson. This linen panel, you can actually see it from the photograph. It's really very nice, and it has a warmth undertone that is actually visible even when I'm using this dark ultramarine blue and alizarin crimson on the shaded areas. There's a little bit of warmth coming through, and I really like that effect on the linen panel. I added a little bit of Indian yellow to that dark mixture for the trees, with a little bit of white for the ones in the background, but the ones in the front had a mixture of them. And it's basically the same ultramarine blue with alizarin crimson, different amounts of Indian yellow, mostly on the trees on the right and the front. I made a tonal range of the same mixture, so different amounts of titanium white with the alizarin crimson and Indian yellow basically, and that was to create the warmth of the stone building. So it's the same. I just had like 3 or 4 piles, and if you could see, I wanted to leave the very broad brush strokes. I didn't use a filbert, was basically 2 flats, number 6 and a number 4. So that was basically just cover as much of the surface as I could, and I didn't even realize what the architecture was. It was sort of just following the areas that I saw in shadows, areas that I saw lighter, and just use that tonal range for basically blocking in the shapes. When I blocked in the sky, I basically just used ultramarine blue and titanium white. What you see there as a warmth underneath is the linen toned canvas, which I really like. As you saw from the photograph that day was there was beautiful clouds, but I didn't want them to overcome the rest. I mean, the focal point is basically the church. And with the same sky color, I carved in the shapes of the trees. I think it's easy for anyone to see that the contours of the trees are actually made by painting the sky on top of the brush uh, broad brush strokes that I had before on the dark areas. So it's carving out also the roof of the building carved out from the sky color, using the sky color. And then I did add a few highlights where I was seeing them, just dots, don't try to even blend them, where I was seeing them the most. And then I did realize that they were architectural features in the church, but I just painted as I was seeing where the bright areas were, and that's what I did. On a second stage, I worked a bit more on the front stone wall and created also a little bit more of the depth. Um, I did define the trees a little bit more, especially the one in the front. I didn't want to have very delicate brush strokes. I wanted it to look more blurred, but I did want it to look more in the front and separate from the building. And for the building, I used very broad strokes everywhere. I didn't want to paint details. This is the final painting. It's a better picture than the previous one. The previous one became a bit bluer. I don't know why, but the sky remains as I had painted it on the first one, with a little bit of the warmth coming through. Um, What I really liked was finishing a bit more of the highlights, making sure that the tonal difference is clear, not only on the building, but I also realized in the backfield there was something, it was too dark and it was not, it was a bit confusing. And by putting these very light, bright areas that are really nondescript, I actually shaped the buttress of the tower better using that very bright contrast. And I think it added some elements to the composition as a whole. Also, I made sure that the shaded areas were very loose edges. I don't even know where the roof starts or ends or a wall, but I wanted to make sure that they were lost and they were not very clear. I don't think there's very sharp edges anywhere in this painting, and I like it that way. And the highlights also dotted just across the whole field in the front with a very warmth color, a little bit of dark shadows in some areas, but also nondescript, helped me with putting the whole composition together and having all the brush strokes more equal around the whole painting. I really enjoyed it. It was a beautiful day, beautiful painting, and I encourage you to go plein air, paint, and have fun.